Hello and welcome to People and Profit, the show where we look at how business shapes our world. Coming up, crude cuts. Tens of thousands of jobs are being slashed as the oil industry adapts to lower oil prices. The world's biggest companies are in Paris to talk climate change. We look at the role of business in capping rising temperatures. Plus, our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi takes a look at Africa's booming tech scene.
Here in Ghana, more people than ever before are using smartphones. Find out how young tech entrepreneurs are hoping to cash in on the growing demand for all things digital.
First, though, the global oil industry has been on a roller coaster ride. Oil prices hit a 6-year low at the start of 2015, but they've bounced back around 40% since March. Still, prices are far from where they were just a year ago. In a moment, we'll look at where prices may be heading next. But first, we'll look at how oil companies are under pressure to slash costs and jobs. Aurore Dupuis has more.
Hey, Grandma. How you doing?
The American oil sector is downsizing, and Kenneth Sanchez is one of those who are feeling the squeeze.
You know, we're having work reductions at work.
Like him, around 100,000 oil workers are thought to have lost their jobs across the US over the past 6 months.
You work hard your whole life since you were just 15 or 16, and then all of a sudden you're faced with the reality of not having a job. It's very scary.
Oil prices took a hit last year, forcing the industry to slash jobs. Prices plummeted by more than 50% since last June, going from around $100 a barrel to under $50 at the beginning of the year. Lower oil prices are great for consumers, but not for Texas, whose economy is based on the industry.
It's kind of like a tax cut. People are paying less for gasoline and diesel. They're paying less for home heating. So it's a net plus for the U.S. economy. Here in Texas, it's a different story.
The U.S. oil industry is, in a way, victim of its own success. American production has grown in recent years, largely due to a boost in shale oil supplies. Reserves that were previously unreachable can now be pumped to the surface. At the same time, OPEC nations like Saudi Arabia have maintained their output. As supplies have grown globally, prices have come under pressure.
So the question is, where do prices go from here? Stephen Carroll is here with his crystal ball. Stephen.
Marcus, for the moment, the outlook looks clouded, but let's start in the present. The International Energy Agency says that global supply was nearly 96 million barrels of oil a day in April. Compare that to demand, which this year will be shy of just 94 million. So the glut remains, with 2.1 million extra barrels of oil being produced every day. So where is it coming from? In the United States, shale oil producers have been slashing production, cutting the number of rigs by 60%. But the OPEC group of oil-producing nations that accounts for 2/3 of global production have increased their supplies to the highest level in nearly 3 years. That's been driven by countries like Iran and Iraq, while non-OPEC members Russia and Brazil are upping production too. We've also seen a big shift in oil company spending. This is a map of cancelled projects compiled for the Financial Times. Oil companies have slashed costs to the tune of $100 billion. That's hit projects from Canada all the way to Australia. So now we look into the future. OPEC production is up and shale oil producers are more efficient thanks to spending cuts. The investment bank Goldman Sachs expects the Brent crude index of oil prices to fall slightly to between $60 and $65 a barrel for the next 5 years. Then it'll go even lower to $55 a barrel in 2020. As the International Energy Agency says, the battle for the oil market is just beginning. Marcus.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that, Stephen Carroll. We're going to move on now. Global leaders will be meeting here in Paris at the end of this year to strike a deal to cap climate change. Their target is to limit a global rise in temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. As a dress rehearsal of sorts, executives from some of the world's biggest companies have gathered here in the French capital to discuss their role looking ahead. Peter Backer leads the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. He told us that unlike the last major climate change summit in Copenhagen in 2009, business will be part of the conversation.
The big breakthrough this year is that for the first time, the political process to come to a global climate agreement has opened up. In the past, it was just nation governments negotiating with each other around a deal. This year, for the first time since the last meeting in Peru, business and cities have been invited to be part of the negotiations.
For more now, we can turn to Alexandra Palt. She's head of sustainability issues and corporate social responsibility at L'Oréal, the French cosmetics giant. Welcome to the program, first of all.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, what do big companies like yours want from a climate deal in Paris later on this year? What are you going to be looking for?
L'Oréal is a very committed company, and so we are looking for a binding commitment and looking forward to a binding commitment also from governments and states and international community, which will help us to go even further and faster as a company, and also for providing tools to us, like carbon price, like others that will allow us to progress faster.
Do you think that a carbon price will happen, so to speak? Will governments be able to agree on a framework, at least for a carbon price?
Yes, I think so. It seems that this is kind of a consensus, that this is really necessary and a tool that will help companies and society and governments to go further.
How are you as a company taking part in the negotiations and the talks in the lead up to the Paris summit in December? Who are you talking to?
Yes, well, actually, you know that companies are not involved in the negotiations because these are negotiations between governments, basically. But now, in the moment, is the Paris Business and Climate Summit, for example, that prepares the road to COP21. And so companies, leading companies say what they are doing, how they are doing it, and what are their targets to fight climate change. And so I think what is really important is to show as business that fighting climate change and successful business is not a contradiction, but goes hand in hand. And I think this is very important to show this also in the preparation for the climate summit, so that businesses are ready for this.
Some may be questioning, though, why businesses should be part of this process in the lead up to the Paris summit. For instance, I suppose there's some skepticism about how committed companies really are to climate change and to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. What do you say about that skepticism?
We have succeeded to cut our CO2 emissions by 50% from a 2005 baseline in absolute terms. So I can quite easily say to criticism, please look at our results, and there you see that we are serious in what we are doing. So I think I would not like to talk about other companies that I don't know from internally, but every stakeholder has to have a look at how companies really do that, report on carbon emissions through, for example, the Carbon Disclosure Project, are transparent on their progress, and the most important thing is that they are committed to progress. And I think it's really important that businesses are involved in this, because economic growth and prosperity has to go hand in hand with fighting climate change, because otherwise we are not going to find the support of consumers, of civil society, of all stakeholders we need to fight climate change.
How much is the transition to a low-carbon economy, or a no-carbon economy for that matter, going to cost, for instance, to L'Oréal?
Well, it's not just cost, it's also beneficiary. When we reduce our emissions by 50%, there's almost the half of these reductions is through energy efficiency, meaning less energy costs, renewable energy, innovations. So we see that all our commitments to sustainability is an incredible source of innovation and of performance, of economic performance.
What can consumers do looking ahead? How can they affect matters and put pressure on companies like you and on governments as well?
Well, I think which is really interesting is that now more and more consumers say that they want companies to really be committed, engaged in sustainability, in responsibility, in communities. That's the citizen who is talking. When it comes to a buying act, we see that consumers are not always taking this into account in the moment they buy something. So what we want to do is, we think there are many reasons for that. That they don't have the right information, it's not easy to buy sustainable products. Very long it was not so aspirational or so beautiful as the mass product. So we think as companies we have to make it easy for consumers to make sustainable choices, and then of course the consumer has to make these sustainable choices in order to encourage companies to go further down that road.
All right, Alexandra Palt from L'Oréal, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much
Thank you.
once again. OK, we're going to move on now. Africa's tech sector is booming and young entrepreneurs in Ghana want to be part of that story. The use of smartphones has almost doubled in the West African nation over the past 3 years. For one startup which develops mobile games, that's a massive market to cash in on. Katerina Vitozzi reports now from Accra.
Africa's first superhero, created by one of Africa's first video game developers. Tech startup Letty Arts was co-founded 6 years ago by Aram Tawia. The firm's digital comic and mobile gaming app is 100% African-made, a fact which still raises eyebrows abroad.
The expectation is before you make games in Africa, you might have schooled elsewhere before coming back to start that. That is not the sort of story we want to tell.
Their story, locally made content with African themes. 55,000 people across Africa have downloaded the mobile app since it launched. Tawia believes that's just the beginning.
Microsoft has come into the market. Samsung is diving into the market. Like all these big players are coming onto the market with cheap mobile phones. That's where we see opportunity, that with time, the gaming industry will grow and it will explode.
But Letty Arts very nearly didn't get off the ground. Investors, both international and local, are still shy of putting their money in an as yet nascent market. So it took seed money from a school that trains local tech entrepreneurs to get Letty Arts and other tech startups like it off the ground.
MEST provides free training to wannabe tech entrepreneurs from Ghana and Nigeria. Top students can pitch for funding to start their own software business.
Investors know very little about the technology climate in this part of Africa. But I think that it's beginning to gain ground. People are beginning to understand more and more, why we sort of need to build technologies for Africa that suit Africa.
In exchange for seed money, MEST gets 10% equity in each new startup, a deal which has created more than 20 new software companies in Ghana.
With that, we're going to be wrapping up this edition of People and Profit. If you want to get in touch, go to our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or tweet me on @MarcusF24. Thank you for watching.